Hi there and welcome back to the series on creating a Laravel Voyager financial website. I'm Gority Golden, and in this video we are going to focus on creating a new Laravel project for our application. So let's dive right in. So before creating this Laravel project, make sure that your local machine has PHP and Composer installed. And when it comes to creating a new Laravel project, we always have two approaches. The first approach is creating a new Laravel project via Composer's create project command, and with this command you always access Composer, then the create project command, then it always has options for passing in the package, and this is always the Laravel package, and you can explicitly set the Laravel version for which you always want to work with, and then you follow this up with the name of the project. Otherwise, you can create this application by using the Laravel installer, but this only works having you globally installed the Laravel installer via Composer. And having installed the Laravel installer, you can always access Laravel, then new, then you pass in the name of the project for which you want to create. Now, with the fact that we are going to work with Voyager for creating our admin interface, we must ensure that we are installing a Laravel package that is compatible with Voyager. And currently, my installer has the latest version of Laravel, which is Laravel 12, at this point of creating the video. But Laravel 12 is not compatible with Voyager, so therefore, I will have to ensure that I'm maybe working with versions that are below 10. From Laravel 10 and below, such versions are compatible with Voyager. So current versions of Laravel like Laravel 12 and Laravel 11, and most especially Laravel 12, are not that stable when it comes to working with the Voyager package. So you can just work with Laravel 10 or Laravel 9 or even Laravel version 8. But I can actually work with version 10. So since we are going to explicitly specify the version of Laravel that we are going to work with, then this approach would be better. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this command such that we create our new project via Composer's create project command, and we specify the version, and I think this is okay for version 10.10. But you can also go ahead and work with any version that you feel like, as long as it's not one of the current versions. So you must ensure that you are accessing a path where you're going to create this project. So I'm going to create mine within the projects folder. So I'll therefore go ahead and open this in my terminal. And if you're using Windows, you type CMD, then enter. And since I've already copied the command, I can just paste it here. So this command goes ahead and creates a fresh Laravel project within our specified path. So the speed of the process will depend on your internet connection, since the project files are fetched from the internet. So once all the files and libraries have been successfully installed, our application will be created. And you can also take note of the fact that it automatically generates for us an application key. And the application key is always used to uniquely identify a Laravel project. So now that our Laravel application has been created successfully, we are going to navigate through it. So you type change directory, then you paste the name of the Laravel application, then you press enter. So within our new application, the first thing that you have to do is to verify the version of Laravel framework that we are working with. So you go ahead and do that by typing PHP artisan -- version, and you can see that the Laravel framework that we are going to work with at this point of time is Laravel 10.48.2 9. So having done that, we can now go ahead and open this folder within Visual Studio Code, but you're also free to work with any IDE of your choice. So when you create a new Laravel project, you always see several folders and files, and here's what each of them does and why they really matter. So now, for example, when you look at the artisan file, and this is actually one of the root files, the artisan file is Laravel's command line interface tool, and it is always used to run commands like migrations, serving the app, and maybe also generating new files. So this is the main command line interface file. And then we also have the other root file, which is the .env file. So that .env file always stores environment specific variables. For example, the database credentials, these, and by default right now they are set to be working with MySQL database management system, and that .env file also stores values for the application key, as you can see, then the app name, and then the app environment, which can be local or be set to production. And the .env should never be shared or committed to the version control. That is, if you're going to work with Git, we always ensure that we leave it out so that we do not share some environment specific values that are confidential. Then the other root file is the composer.json file, and this always stores a list of PHP dependencies and some autoload settings, because now currently you can see that the version of PHP that this project is going to work with is 8.1, and the Laravel version that has been set is Laravel 10. And then in terms of Laravel Sanctum, we are having 3.3, and this is for the authentication part of it, and a number of these. Then in terms of the autoload, we are having the factories and then the seeders also already set up. So the composer.json file is always used by Composer to install and manage the project packages or the project dependencies. And in addition to the composer.json file, it also moves hand in hand sometimes with the package.json file. And this is used for managing front-end dependencies. That is, if you're going to work with Vite or Vue, and also the fact that we are going to work with Tailwind CSS. This is one of the files that is going to give us those add-on abilities. So the package.json file works with Node JavaScript and npm or yarn. That is why initially I was telling you that you also have to ensure that you have Node installed, and this is also going to be used for managing the project assets. Then we also have vite.config.js, and this is always the configuration file for Vite, and Vite is always used as a front-end build tool. And we also have the readme.md, but this is always a markdown file that can be used for project documentation if you wanted to share more insights about this project. And with time, we are going to ensure that we are working with the readme.md file so that we provide insights on this project, especially if we push it to GitHub. So those were the main root files. And within the project folder, you can also see that we have some other folders, and I'm going to provide insights on the key folders. So starting with the app subfolder, this always contains the core logic of your application, and when you check it out, it has some other subfolders. For example, the HTTP, which also stores controllers, middlewares, then the kernel.php, and all requests are always sent to this folder. Then the application folder also has the models, and the eloquent models that are going to represent the database tables are always stored within this folder. Then we also have the console. So the console is always a custom artisan command file, which you can always use to customize the commands furthermore. And then in terms of error handling, we always have exceptions. And the exceptions folder is always used for custom exception handling, and by default this is one of the handler for error handling. Then we also have the providers. Now the providers, these are always service providers that bootstrap your application. So for example, when you look at the auth service provider, then the app service provider, and then in terms of the routing, so the app folder is always the heart of the application, and that is its main importance in terms of Laravel. Then we also have the bootstrap. So the bootstrap folder always contains the app.php file, which bootstraps all the Laravel framework, and it also has the cache subfolder that stores compiled files that can be used to speed up the application performance. Then we also have the config. So now, like it sounds, we have the config in that it contains all the configuration files, like the app.php contains all the application configuration settings. For example, the name, the environment, and the debug mode, the time zone, the URL and etc, the locality support and all that. Then it also has the authentication configurations in terms of the authentication guards, the passwords, and a lot. Then in terms of configuration, so it has a number of them. Then you can see the course origin, resource sharing configurations, then the database configuration, and by default it works with MySQL. Then in terms of mailing and etc, so it has a number of configurations for the application. So you can always change settings like maybe the time zone or the database configuration by accessing this config folder. The other main root folder is the database folder. Within the database folder, we always have other subfolders like the migrations folder, and the migration files always point to the database schema definition for any table. So you can see that this file, create users table, defines the schema of the schema or the structure of the users table, meaning that the users table is going to have fields or attributes like the ID, the name, the email verified at, password, remember token, and then the timestamps. Then in addition to the folders that are stored within the database subfolder, we always have the seeders. Now the seeders are always used to insert default, or it can also be test data into the tables, and this is always the main database seeder file that is created for you by default. Then we also have factories, and factories are always used for generating fake data for testing purposes. So you can see that currently we have some of these that have been already set up for us. And moving forward, we also have the public folder. Now with the public folder, the web server always points here, and this folder always contains the index.php file, and the index.php file is always the entry point of the application. And this folder also stores front-end assets like CSS and JavaScript, or even the images. They can be stored there. And remember that Laravel works with the model view controller architecture, so we also have the resources. Now the resources always keep track of the views, in that we have files pointing to the blade templates, and these always point to the Laravel's templating engine for the UI, and this is always the default blade file, which is welcome.blade.php. And within this folder we also have some CSS and JavaScript assets that can be used with Vite. So we have quite a number of files, and then sometimes if you wanted to work with localization, then we can always have the language folder in here that keeps track of the language files for localization. That is if we are going to work with multilingual support. Now we also have the roots folder. Now, the routes folder is a folder that is always keeping track of the routes for the application or the routing configuration. And we have the web.php, and this file is always used for storing the routes for the web browser requests. And we also have the api.php, and the api.php file keeps track of the routes for API requests. That is if you're going to work with an API. Then we also have the console.php, and this one is mainly used for the artisan route commands. We also have the storage folder. Now, the storage folder stores logs, and currently we do not have any, but it stores logs and cached views. Then it also works with file uploads and other runtime generated files. Then it also has subfolders for the app, then the framework, and then I've already talked about the logs. Then you also have the tests. So the test always contains the unit and feature tests for the application, as you can see. And in here we always work with PHP unit most of the times. That is used for testing in Laravel. Then we also have the vendor. So the vendor folder is always auto-generated by Composer, and it stores all the third-party PHP packages and Laravel itself. So I believe that you always do not have to touch this folder most of the times, especially if you want to make changes. So in conclusion, each of this folder and file plays a very crucial role in Laravel's MVC architecture, and understanding this structure is the first step in mastering Laravel development. So that's pretty much it in terms of the insights for the folders and the files. So now let's stick back to what we wanted to achieve. So having created this project, you must take note of the .env file. So the fact that we already have an application key, we are good to go. But in case you did not have an application key, you must always ensure that you set it up so that your Laravel application is uniquely identified. And you can do that by typing PHP artisan key generate, then you press enter. So you can see that it has actually created a new key, but the key is always a 32-bit string, and it is always created randomly every time you run the PHP artisan key generate command. So you can see that it has also been changed. So as of now, we are going to go ahead and run our application by typing PHP artisan serve. So by default, Laravel applications are served or do run on port 8000, and I'm therefore going to right click. The fact that we are working with Laravel 10, this is always the default welcome page. So that is it for this video. We have successfully created a new Laravel application for our project, and we ensured that we worked with Laravel Framework version 10 because this is one of the versions that are very compatible with Laravel Voyager. And I've also provided insights regarding the project structure for any new Laravel project. Thanks for watching, and see you again in the next session where we are going to set up our database configuration.